In the year 789 AD, 3 longships from Hordaland, now modern-day Norway, crossed the North Sea. The reason for their journey is unclear, but it is suspected that it could have been for trading purposes or possibly raiding purposes. The party eventually found themselves arriving at Portland Bill on the southern coast of Wessex in England. They were met by the local Saxon people who were very curious as to who these new visitors were. Some historians believe this to be the fact that the bad weather conditions had forced the boats towards the Portland area. Either way, we know for sure what happened next. The king in 789 AD was Beorhtric of Wessex, meaning magnificent ruler. He had appointed a reeve. This was a senior official with local responsibilities under the crown. Upon learning that the Nordic visitors had arrived, the reeve and his men hastily made their way to Portland with the intention of collecting a levy on behalf of the king. The Vikings felt more and more threatened at the presence of the reeve and his men, possibly due to a language barrier. A fight ensued and the reeve and his men were slaughtered. This would become the first record of Viking killings. They boarded their longships and hastily travelled back to their homeland. The events on Portland would not only cause outrage within the kingdom of Wessex, but throughout every other kingdom in England. In 792 AD, King Offa of Mercia set up defences in the neighbouring kingdom of Kent against the pagan people. A year later, the Vikings appeared yet again, this time to raid the holy island of Lindisfarne in Northumbria. The monastery was named the centre of Christianity and was founded in 634 AD by a monk named Saint Aidan. This was built for King Oswald after he converted to Christianity. Aidan was sent from Iona Abbey in Scotland to Northumbria at Lindisfarne. Aidan greatly succeeded in spreading the Christian faith in northern England until his death in late 651 AD. 142 years later after Aidan's death, 2 terrible things would happen in Lindisfarne. Firstly, a famine would cause most of the monks to perish, but maybe the most terrifying was the Viking raid on the 8th of June 793 AD. The Vikings landed their longships at the southern side of the island, which was right next to the priory. They spread around and across the island to find inhabitants. Maybe some of the monks were outside during the raid and were immediately slaughtered as the Vikings came through. They then proceeded to storm through to the priory, killing more monks and unleashing vast bloodshed. The Vikings would take the monastery's many riches, including golden crosses, books, goblets and food, and taking the remaining monks as hostages, who would later be sold off as slaves. The monastery was burnt down and the Vikings departed. The raid on Lindisfarne sent shockwaves throughout the Christian world. Alcuin of York, a scholar at the court of Charlemagne, said, "Never before has such terror appeared in Britain, as we have now suffered from a pagan race. The heavens poured out the blood of saints around the altar, and trampled on the bodies of saints in the temple of God, like dung in the streets." We don't know the true reason for the attack on the Holy Island, although I have a couple of ideas of my own, such as it being such an easy location to raid due to it being undefended, or maybe the Vikings were driven to Lindisfarne because of the lack of food in Norway, because of poor weather conditions that led to a bad harvest, and even animals dying. The island was abandoned soon after, but it would be purchased in the 11th century by William of St. Calais, the first Norman Bishop of Durham. William later gave a vast amount of property and land to his new Benedictine monastery, which included the Holy Island and much of the surrounding mainland. In 795 AD, much like the raid on Lindisfarne, the Vikings would go and attack St. Paul's Monastery in Jarrow, also in Northumbria, where they went across the River Tyne and burning the monastery to the ground. Unfortunately for the Viking leader, who was spotted by the local Saxons, was captured and killed, whilst the others escaped, but they wouldn't get far as they were stuck in a ferocious storm whilst returning home and sunk. In the year 806 AD, the Vikings attacked the abbey on the island of Iona, although this wouldn't be the first time, as they also raided in 795 AD, 802 and later on in 825 AD. Maybe the cause of these frequent raids on the British Isles were due to the Vikings having a permanent base on the island of Zetland, now called Shetland, where they once again boarded their longships and sailed to Iona. 68 monks were massacred and the abbey's wealth was plundered. The fourth attack on Iona in 825 AD would spark the start of the Viking Age, not only in the British Isles, but the whole of Europe. In the following years, there would be many more attacks on monasteries, towns, and cities. For example, in France, on the 29th of March 845 AD, the Vikings sieged Paris. Their army consisted of over 120 longships carrying 5,000 men, led by the legendary Ragnar Lothbrok, against King Charles the Bold, leading to a Viking victory. In 850 AD, the Vikings spent the winter on the Isle of Thanet in Kent, but would continue attacking the area in spring. 15 years later, in 865 AD, the Great Heathen army arrived in East Anglia. Ragnar Lothbrok's 4 children would lead a coalition of just over 1,000 fierce Scandinavian warriors, of which were amongst the largest force of its kind. When they landed, they were met by King Edmund the Martyr of East Anglia, who provided them with resources and in return asked for peace. Although the Vikings would break their promise and kill him in battle 4 years later in 869 AD. The Vikings would stay in England over the winter months of 865 AD, in the market town of Thetford in Norfolk, before marching on the city of York on the 1st of November 866 AD. Maybe they decided to siege York due to a rebellion present around Northumbria at the time. York was eventually captured and was made the Viking capital in Britain. It was later renamed Jorvik, meaning Wild Boar Creek. The Vikings would go on to attack much of the kingdom of Mercia and Northumbria in the following years, and pillaged many more settlements, of which would change England forever.